We've labeled hunger as weakness, fatigue as laziness, cravings as failure, and weight gain as betrayal. We've been translating our body's signals all wrong. And today we're going to dig into that.
Why do we keep going back to quick fixes, even when we know they don't work?
Welcome to the Coach's Hotline. Glucose, grit, and grace. Real talk with coaches, no sugarcoating.
We're here to help you ditch the diet cycle, stabilize blood sugar, and finally feel at home in your body.
Because health isn't about restriction. It's about freedom, energy, and confidence.
Let's dive in.
Welcome back to Health Coach Hotline, Glucose, Grit, and Grace. I'm Coach Elaine. And as always, I'm here with my two favorite coaches, Coach Amber and Coach Elaine. So we're so glad to be spending part of our day with you and glad that you're here. If you've listened to our podcast for any length of time, you know that we spend a lot of time talking about blood sugar, metabolism, hormones, inflammation, stress, habits, all of the things that influence our health. But today, I want to pull back the camera just a little bit so we can take a wider view of something important that few people really talk about. Because underneath all of those topics is one skill that makes every other health habit more effective. And that skill is awareness. Not the kind of awareness where you say, I know I should drink more water, or I know I need to go to the gym or get to bed earlier, because most of us already know those things, right? I'm talking about something deeper than information. I'm talking about becoming a student of your own body, learning to notice patterns, learning to ask better questions, recognizing the difference between what your body is actually saying and the story that your mind immediately creates about it. Because here's something I've realized after coaching women for years: we generally don't have a motivation problem. And most women, especially, don't have a discipline problem. We don't even have a knowledge problem. We know a lot of stuff, right? But here's what we have an interpretation problem. Our body gives us information every minute of the day. And somewhere between the sensation and the conclusion, something gets lost. We feel tired, right? And we think immediately, well, I'm lazy. Or we feel hungry and we immediately think, I have no willpower. We crave sugar and we think, oh, I failed again. That sensation is real, but that story that we attach to it is not always true. So when we start believing those stories, we begin making decisions based on assumptions instead of real understanding. So Amber, Elaine, I wanted to talk about this today. Women in midlife are seeing their bodies change, maybe because of metabolic issues, definitely because of hormones, but we're still using those old standards, trying to interpret what's going on. And we say, oh, it's just aging. Nothing's going on. I'm just getting old. So when women come to you guys feeling like they don't know what's going on with their own bodies, what are they dealing with that they still haven't been able to understand correctly? Or in other words, where do you see that those communication lines between the body and our brains breaking down the most? And why do you think that is?
Well, I think you had said, like feeling tired, we equate it to being lazy.
Mhm.
I have seen women, now I'm 52, but I have seen women in their early 40s sitting in, chairs at a baseball game, and they stand up and they're a little achy and like, oh my God, I'm so old. You're like, wow, you're not even halfway through life. So if you're already feeling old at 40, what is the rest of existence going to look like? And I think that it's not necessarily that they don't know what's going on. They just have a definition that is not serving them. Because if you are tired, we know that can mean a whole bunch of different things. Is it our hydration? Is it our nutrition? Did we have a poor night of sleep? And when we just sum it up to, oh, well, I'm just lazy, then I think it gives us an excuse, not a feel good excuse by any
Mm-mm.
shape of the imagination, but it's also, well, I'm lazy, so there's not a fix for lazy. I just have to get
Uh,
mad at myself, or I have to have more motivation or more discipline. And like you said, we women are incredibly resilient. Motivation and discipline are not our issues.
never.
Like we are powerhouses to the max. We take care of everybody, but when we have a definition that is unsolvable, like, oh, I'm achy, I'm getting old. Well, aging is just a rite of passage. It's just a thing that happens, right? But when we at 40 are saying, well, I'm just getting old, we've given it a label and we've also decided that it doesn't have a solution. And I
That's
think that's
powerful.
where the disconnect, because if there's no solution, why would I change anything?
Yeah, and kind of going along with that, Amber, what you just said, I think it's that women aren't confused because they're not paying attention. They know that they're tired. They know that they're hungry or whatever it is. But they're confused because they've been given the wrong interpretation
Hmm?
of what those things are. So as an example, people are hearing or they're feeling I'm hungry, but what they're hearing is I'm weak because I want to eat something. Or they're
Mhm.
hearing, like you said, I'm tired. I'm sorry, they're saying I'm tired and they hear I'm lazy or I need to eat. So they hear I have no willpower. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of times it's just looking at, let's not interpret that. Let's go back to what we're feeling and 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 find something for that. So, and the body isn't speaking your the wrong language. It
Yeah.
is telling you what you need to hear. But we've been taught that maybe we're getting the wrong translation on that. So instead of I'm tired, it's like, okay, why am I tired? Well, it's
Hmm.
because I was up at 4 o'clock this morning. I packed all the lunches. I went to work. I came home. I did the laundry. I cleaned the house, whatever it is. You're going to be tired, and that's okay. That is not lazy.
No.
So I think sometimes we just need to look at what those translations are that we're telling ourselves versus what our body's telling us.
Yeah. And I don't think we've ever really been thought or taught to understand what the body means. We've always been taught
Yeah,
that hunger is something that you have to push through. Hunger means that you're going to eat and then get fat, instead of
right.
hunger being your body saying, hello, I need some energy to do the things that I need to do for you.
Yep, yep.
Well, and I have, as I have been coaching, I have started to come to this realization, and I may get pushback on this, but hear me out. We are more like cars than we realize, except that we take better care of our cars. When our check
Mm,
engine lights come on, we take it to the garage or we take it to a place that has the code thingy and they plug it in and they see exactly what's
Yep,
wrong with the car and then we get it fixed.
yep.
But tired, hunger, aching, those are your body's check engine lights. And we definitely have not been taught to give it the same attention that we do other things like our cars.
that's a really powerful analogy. I will not push back on you at all about that,
No,
because
no.
I think, yeah, that's crazy. And it makes me think, um, maybe maybe listening to our bodies isn't really the first step. Maybe the first step is our mindset and believing that our body is worth listening to in the first place, that our
Yep,
bodies are more important than our cars or our houses or all these material things around us, because our bodies are what holds us, and our bodies is what is going to get us through our lives, right?
hmm, yep,
And if we feel like our body has betrayed us by being hungry or holding on to weight, I can understand why you wouldn't want to pay attention
Mhm.
to it, right? Because you're mad at it. It's an enemy, it's not a
Right.
friend. But if you
Yeah.
think about it as a friend, what if my body, if you think about it this way, what if my body has actually been trying to protect me all along? That was my big aha. I remember sitting on the couch and crying when I was learning about this blood sugar balance and how hard my body worked to keep me alive. That was such an aha moment for me because I'm like, oh, you weren't fighting me. You were actually working really hard to keep me alive and love me. And I interpreted it totally wrong, right?
Hmm.
Well, and I think that interpretation also is a matter of trust. When the oil light on our car comes on, we don't go, you know what? I don't really think you need oil. I gave you oil a month ago. You don't need oil. But our bodies were like, oh, you don't need more sleep. You definitely don't need more food. I already fed you. And we don't trust those signals. And what's really scary is that the longer that we ignore our body's signals, the less our body is going to give those signals. Because it's like, why am
That's
I
the point.
sounding the alarm when you're not going to listen anyways?
Yeah. Well, and I think we've learned that we think we know more than our bodies do.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We're like, and you kind of said, oh, I just fed you.
Yeah.
Okay, but what did you feed me? And was it balanced? Is it going to satisfy me? Is it what my body needs?
Hmm.
Um, and to me, that's so powerful when it comes to being aware of what's happening.
Yeah.
So,
Mm. Well, because between the three of us, we've coached a lot of women and a lot of
Hmm.
even men, people
Hmm.
through the 100 days program. And we talk a lot about this, about being aware and listening to your body's signals and understanding what they mean. So I'm kind of curious about what you guys have noticed when people first start paying attention to their bodies. And while we don't try to change everything overnight, first we start with just observation, right? When your clients first start listening to their bodies, what surprises them the most? Like, where do you see, is there a pattern where you can see like over and over again that people suddenly realize like, wow, I've never noticed that before? I have a client that I was working with the other day, and she's like, why did nobody ever teach me this? All of this makes so much sense,
Hmm.
right? It's like we don't have a manual to go with our bodies. So she she was just amazed that she was just, in her 50s, just learning
Hmm.
that hunger is actually a signal that your body needs food, not that your body doesn't need food.
Well, and I also find the majority of clients that I have worked with already eat healthy. And they
That was
come,
air quotes for those of you listening. Eat healthy was
yes,
in
right.
air
exactly.
quotes.
Oh, sorry. I forget not everything is visual. Um, yeah, so they think they are eating healthy. And so once, but they're still having their 3 p.m. crash and falling asleep on the couch in the afternoon.
Hmm.
And so it's the realization that, oh wow, I was eating healthy. I didn't actually change the types of foods that I'm eating, but I changed how I eat them. I changed the order in which I eat them. One of my clients now, every time she hears a recipe from a friend or a meal that her cousin or her sister's eaten, she's like, there's not enough protein in that. You should have started with. And I love that because like she's starting to become like the teacher, the coach, because she's
Right.
embraced it so much. And it's just been amazing. So I think that's one of them is I already am eating healthy. So what else could I do? Well, there's actually a lot of things that you can do. And that's what we're here to help guide people through.
Yeah, and and I'm not sure that it's the first aha moment, but
Hmm.
very shortly once they start the 100 days, is the importance, like you said, Amber, of balancing those
Yeah.
protein, fats, and carbs. I mean, a lot of people don't get enough protein. I can
Mhm.
tell you that when I started down this journey, and I really, for me, people have to come to me. I can't force what I'm going to do because that just, that's not
Yeah.
what this is about.
No.
So, but this is my husband, okay? So I live together, we live together, obviously. We sit across from each other, and I'm looking at what he's eating, going, oh my gosh, that is so much carbs. Where's, like you just said, where's the protein?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it is understanding and beginning, because we teach from the very beginning what spikes and dips do for you in your blood, or don't do for you in your blood sugar stabilization journey. And just the importance of that, because I think in some respects that is taught to people who are diabetic, but it's
Yes.
not taught to the everyday person. And I think that's one of the things I hear. I never realized I needed to worry about my blood sugar. So,
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think it's an important point. I think this is an important discussion because if anything, it reminds us that awareness isn't something that you're born with. It's a skill.
right.
But the good news about that is that any skill is learnable and it gets stronger with practice, right? So we don't
Yes.
have to be stuck in that, oh, my back aches, I'm getting old, or oh, I'm hungry, I have to push through. We don't have to stay in those, I'm going to call them broken mindsets because
Yeah.
they are mindsets that hold us back. They're not mindsets that help us grow. They're not mindsets that um, give us hope. They're actually mindsets that stagnate us, right?
Yes.
I think it's interesting that most of us think we know our bodies really well simply because we've lived in them. But
Hmm.
living in a body and understanding a body is not the same thing. And I want to explore that a little bit next because I think there's a difference between like knowing your routines and knowing yourself and understanding signals that your body's giving you. So let's talk about that because I think we've become experts at ignoring ourselves.
Absolutely.
We've become incredibly good at that, especially as women, because we think everybody else should come first and my own needs don't matter. Even to the point where, like, if we're cooking something and one, like, if we're cooking eggs in the morning and one of them breaks, we're like, oh, I'll take that one because we don't feel worthy. We don't want to give the worst to other people, but we don't realize that when we give good to ourselves, we give better to other people. But maybe that's another episode. Anyway, um, we're trained really to ignore our bodies. We didn't do it on purpose. We were trained from an early age because remember when we were kids, we might come to our mom and say, Mommy, I'm hungry, I'm hungry. And she'll say, but lunch isn't for another hour or dinner is at 5. So just wait, have some water, you can wait. Or we're tired, but there's still homework to finish. And we're like, our mothers or fathers are like, just push through, you got to get this done. Or we're stressed, but everybody else is stressed too. And everyone says, well, don't be so emotional about it all. Or here's one when you were younger and you were eating dinner and you got full and there's still food on your plate. What did your parents say to you?
There are starving children in
Living
Ethiopia.
children.
Yeah.
Clean your
Yeah.
plate.
One of the things my dad used to tell us is we'd say, oh, my back hurts. He's like, you're not old enough to have a back. Move on.
Wow. Yeah. And so we're taught. So here's the thing. Okay. So before anyone misunderstands me, I'm not saying that our parents were wrong. Most of them were doing the best that they could, and they were doing what society was saying to do. I think we're starting to change those lessons. And I see my niece with my great niece and nephew, and they're very good about making sure that they're eating well and eating healthy and not eating packaged foods. And they'll sit at the table and they'll eat what everybody else eats, but when they're full, they don't have to finish their plate. And so I think those messages are changing.
Mhm.
Um, but those lessons ultimately were taught to us. And they did teach us resilience. They taught us responsibility. They taught us perseverance. But sadly, the other side was that they also taught us to ignore ourselves.
Mhm.
right? We learned that our body signals were unimportant and everybody else's or expectations came first. So I think what happened is little by little we stopped talking about we stopped thinking or asking what am I experiencing right now, and we started asking what do I do about it instead of asking what the root cause of
Mhm.
it was, right? um and I think it's interesting that it doesn't just happen in childhood because we reinforce it when we are adults. And even, I don't know, I a little confession time, even me, I do it sometimes where I'm
Mhm.
like, I'm so busy, I don't have time to work out. So I'll just do it tomorrow. And that is every time that comes up for me, I'm like, what am I doing to myself? That is not the right answer. You should never be too busy to take care of yourself.
Yep.
Well, and
Right.
remember,
So
tomorrow never comes. So,
exactly. It's always today.
exactly.
So, well, the body keeps score. The body keeps trying to talk to us. And the bottom line is we cannot ignore those messages and we can't erase them. What do you guys have thoughts on this?
So I think here's something that we don't naturally realize. I think that living in your body every day doesn't make you an expert. An example is like when I go to the grocery store. I drive the same route. I can get there without even thinking about it, right? Sometimes, there's places that I've driven to and I'm like, I don't actually remember that whole drive. But I got there, so I clearly did the drive. But if
Right.
you asked me to
Yeah.
draw the map and label all of the streets that I passed, I couldn't do that. I'd give you the major ones, most likely, but like every little detail along the way, I couldn't do it. And why? Because it's not that I haven't driven that route for forever, but familiarity isn't the same as observation. And I
Mm,
think that we do that very often with our bodies. I mean, we've lived in our bodies for decades, and so we do assume that we know exactly what's going on in our bodies. And so we feel this sense of self-awareness, but we don't necessarily have it. We've definitely stopped observing. We've stopped getting curious and asking questions. When we ache, I'm old. There's no question. It's not why am I achy? If I'm tired, it's just hungry. Well, I just ate, so I can't be hungry. Well, no, your body is needing something if you are still experiencing hunger. But I think it's so much easier. It's an easier lift for us to jump to the old conclusions and the old stories, you know. And especially, I think we are definitely trained by what we hear other people say.
mm,
Especially like kids listen to everything adults say. And so they know that when an adult gets out of a chair and, oh, I'm old, they know that when they get out of that chair when they're older, it's because they're old.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
think we very unintentionally train train from very early ages to say the things that we say when we get older.
Yeah, we definitely do. But also around kind of bringing it to today.
Hmm.
So if you say, because I know this was me, full disclosure here, I would have to have something in the afternoon, especially
Hmm.
when I was working. I always needed chocolate or chips or something around 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But then when I kind of got to this lifestyle, and maybe if you're having these kinds of cravings at that, think about, do you really need it? Or have you just trained your brain to accept that every afternoon around 2 or 3 o'clock, I'm going to call it a snack. So we've become experts at functioning instead of
mm,
necessarily noticing.
mm,
So, I mean, and I can't tell you how many women have told me that they don't know why they eat their snack in the afternoon. But then when we start paying closer attention and we talk about how they had coffee for breakfast, they skipped lunch, and now their bodies are like, hey, I need some energy so I can finish out this day. So we have to look at that, but that's the awareness. A lot of times I call it the five, well, it's not, it's something that's out there. You can look it up, do a Google search on the 5 whys. Ask
Mhm.
yourself why 5 times. And a lot of times you're going to dive into a little bit more information. So, and kind of the example that I just talked about of why am I craving stuff at 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon? Oh, I had coffee for breakfast. Well, why did I just have coffee for breakfast? Well, because I was rushed and I didn't get up in time to have breakfast. So I made my coffee and left. Well, why didn't you have time to make your breakfast? And then just keep asking those whys. And
Mm.
eventually it's probably going to come out, and it's no guilt. It's all information. It's
Mhm.
data that we're going to take to process in order to get to this point of awareness. But so, when it comes to that 2, 3 o'clock, 2, 3 o'clock crash, that's hard to say together. Um, it's like I always need something sweet. Maybe you're always starving at night. I can tell you, after I got past that 2, 3 o'clock thing, then it became 7 o'clock. So it's kind of like we worked through what was up there. Okay, now we're kind of peeling that onion and going on to what's happening next. So maybe you're starving at night. Maybe that's where you need to start. But then ask, always, are we always doing this really? Or are we simply repeating the same pattern that we've been doing for so many years?
I love that. It's like it's more about getting curious about the reason
Yes.
rather than jumping to the conclusion,
Mhm.
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And I love that, the 5 whys. Um, and I think that that's really important because that gives a real tangible tool for becoming curious. Why is this
Hmm.
happening? And then you ask, what can I do about it? So asking
Yeah.
the whys, that's really important. But if you come to the conclusion that you don't have time for breakfast in the morning because you're up till 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning,
Hmm.
streaming on your phone, then that awareness is really good. But then the next step is let's do something about it to fix that
Yeah.
pattern, right?
Because I think a lot of it is a domino effect. So yes, in the example
Mhm.
I gave, I had coffee for breakfast. I didn't eat lunch, and I hadn't had anything. So now comes my 2 or 3 o'clock. But a lot of times we think, oh, it's because I didn't eat lunch. Well, maybe that's not the reason. So, again, maybe you start eating lunch and you find that you're still doing that. But you need to keep asking yourself those questions just to make sure that it's not a pattern that you're seeing. Well, and it is a pattern. If it is, we need to break that pattern. We all know about habits, and if we can break that pattern, that's one of the first steps in breaking a habit. So,
Yeah.
Well, and I love that because I think the majority of humans are on autopilot. All of those
hmm,
patterns, when they work together, are 100% autopilot. And so if you
yep,
do something every single day, whether it serves you or doesn't, it's autopilot. And so when you do start becoming aware, it's like, well, I always scroll before I go to bed. Okay. And is it serving you? Is there a way that you could do some scrolling so that you get to check that off, but then you also take some time to get your mind and your brain and your body ready for sleep so that you have restful sleep? And I think that awareness is so critical and asking those whys. If you are craving at 3 o'clock in the afternoon because you scrolled the night before, I mean, there is a huge domino effect. And asking those whys helps you get back to that root so then you can start addressing, okay, what is going on and how do I start to break that pattern? How do I go from autopilot to intentionality?
Yeah. I think the first question is how do we slow down enough to actually hear what our body is?
Yeah.
Let me say that again because I just choked. How can women slow down enough to actually hear what our body has been trying to say?
yeah, that's probably the hardest part because we think we have to keep going to get everything done.
Mhm.
Hmm.
When in reality, if we can just take a moment, we're not talking about an hour, we're not talking about days to look at this. Just take a moment to say, okay, where am I right now? Kind
Mhm.
of get that mind body together to say, okay, I've been running so fast, I have no idea what's next. So just take a deep breath and, trying to refocus. And once you start doing that, I firmly believe that it then helps to allow us to allow ourselves to say, I can take a moment right now. And a lot of times it's just us giving ourselves permission to take that moment,
Mm, that's
to
powerful. And that
become
goes
aware.
back to us feeling worthy enough to do it. I
Yes.
call that white space. And something that was really powerful for me is I started practicing that white space every time I would change tasks. So if I'm at work, I'm working on one thing, I finish it up, and I would just take a minute and I would take some deep breaths and I would think about, okay, what's going on with me? Do I have to go to the bathroom? Because sometimes I will even ignore that need because I'm doing something and it's
Yeah.
like I want to finish it and I can just hold it. So, ask myself, do I have to go to the bathroom? Do I need some water? Is it time to fuel my body yet? Do I need to stand up and stretch and just kind of be aware of what my body needs and then go
Yeah.
on, do it, and then go on to my next task. So, even, if you're a mom running errands, you can say, okay, I just went into Kohl's, did my exchanges, got the stuff I need. I'm back in my car. What do I need?
Yes.
I love
Yes.
that.
I do
You know,
so.
I want to do a little activity with everybody, with our audience, and with you guys as well. If you're driving, do not close your eyes. But if you are not driving, go ahead and close your eyes
Okay.
and picture like happy hour or lunch or getting together with your nearest and dearest friends. What do you love about that? The talking,
And
the
the joy. Yeah.
support.
Laughing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? That happened to me. I felt the same way. That community, that connecting.
Connecting. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So now go ahead and open your eyes. And I want people to think about this. When we are learning, or, I would say it even comes before then. And I know for me personally, every time I went, and looked for a new diet, I did it by myself. I mean, sometimes I would hear like somebody else is on this diet, so I gotta try it. Sometimes, but it was never actually something that I talked to people about. Now, if I had lost weight and people were like, "Oh, you look good," which is code for you just got skinnier.
Right.
Um, oh yeah, well, I'm doing this, and that, and then that's where the conversation stopped. But that same feeling that when we get with our nearest and dearest, that support, those conversations, that beauty, if we were able to bring that into us taking care of ourselves, we wouldn't feel so alone. It
Mhm.
wouldn't feel isolating, and we wouldn't be relying on our old patterns and our old narratives to support us when we're trying to make a change.
In essence, we'd stop living on autopilot, right? Because we would
Yes.
start communicating and understanding what we
Yeah.
needed and start making those choices with purpose, with the
Mhm.
right information, instead of jumping to a conclusion.
Absolutely. Well, and when I started the 100 days for myself personally, having a group of women and a coach that I could ask questions to and just get like information from the collective, like, hey, have you guys experienced this? Was so powerful. And I
Mhm.
do believe that that was one of the keys to success, was that I always felt supported. And I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of power in that.
Yeah,
There
I
definitely
agree.
is.
Very powerful. Yeah, so I think that's our time today. And I think that we've talked about some very powerful things: the power of community, the power of paying attention, the power of slowing down, the power of not jumping to a conclusion, but instead of going to the end, maybe going back, asking yourself why and what do you need. And these kinds of things create awareness. So, why does all of that matter? It's because awareness is where meaningful change begins, right? You can't improve your sleep if you don't notice what's stealing it. You can't stabilize your blood sugar if you don't recognize the patterns that send it on a roller coaster. You can't lower your stress if you never stop long enough to admit that you're just carrying too much. And you can't fuel your body well if you've forgotten what true hunger and true satisfaction really feel like. So, awareness is the starting point, it's not the doorway. And here's the good news: the body is incredibly adaptable. It wants to heal, it wants to find balance, and it wants to move toward health. But it can only respond to the choices that we consistently make. So, the quality of those choices is directly influenced by what we notice. And when we could become more aware, we stop reacting impulsively and we start responding intentionally. So, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Health Coach Hotline, Glucose, Grit, and Grace. We always appreciate you spending your time with us. And we hope that these conversations encourage you to take one more step toward living with greater health, greater purpose, and greater grace. If today's episode resonated with you, of course you should share it with your friends and family members. And because you never know who might need the reminder that their body is yearning to be understood. And if you haven't already, we'd love for you to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, because it helps more people discover the show and it means you won't miss our future conversations. So until next time, take care of yourself and be aware. Bye.
Bye.